Welcome to Mining Now. I'm your host, Jared Downey. We are very excited today to announce that Imperial and Finning are going to be joining the show today. We'll be discussing how they're working together to create a more sustainable future for Canadian mining. We're going to welcome Jon Wetmore. He's the Vice President, Downstream and Chemicals at Imperial, and Lynette Lefsrud. I think I just butchered her name. I'll get her to confirm that. Global Program Leader, Sustainable Solutions at Finning. We're going to jump right in. So Jon, Lynette, welcome to the show. Lynette, we'll start with you. Did I get your name right? Lefsrud?
Yes, you did. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah,
welcome.
No problem at all.
Very excited to have both you on and to talk Imperial and Finning. Can we just kick off with just your background, your roles? Jon, we can start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jon Wetmore. I'm the Vice President of Downstream for Imperial. So that means I look after the refineries, the terminals, the pipelines, all the way out to the final fuels to customer. I've been with Imperial and with ExxonMobil, actually, for about 28 years, half and half between those two companies, moving between Europe and the US and here in Canada. And I'm just really excited to be talking to you because we are miners too as Imperial Oil. We've got a really big mine operation in northern Alberta at our Curl site. So it's just really cool for me to be able to talk to you at both levels as the fuel supplier and as a miner itself as well.
Yeah, it's I have to say, when I pictured Imperial coming on the show, I thought it was going to be on our building energy side. So it's kind of a nice surprise that it's actually on our mining side and leading up to CIM. So I'm glad you're joining us, Jon. Lynette, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks very much. So essentially the work I do at Finning is ultimately to help our customers decarbonize and reach their sustainability goals. So I do a lot of work in the decarbonization space, but I also work in Indigenous engagement. And we also focus on emissions compliance and looking for funding for our customers as well as they work on bigger projects. My background actually is in the areas, I've been in oil and gas for a long time, and I was also worked in the oil sands space for a long time. So familiar with both the oil sands from a mining perspective, but also from an oil and gas perspective. And for this project, we've been working with Imperial on this renewable diesel project for quite some time, and really excited to partner with them.
Yeah, when you just give even those brief titles, it's a shame I only get to lock you in for a 40-minute discussion, but I will keep it concise. A lot of talk about the mining energy transition in Canada. Can you, and I think we're going to start with Jon on this one as well. Can you talk a little bit about, there's a lot happening. So can you give us where Imperial and Finning are looking to find opportunities in that vertical specifically?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's just so much happening in the energy transition and with everyone's different ideas about how to decarbonize various industries. The mining industry is obviously a hard to abate, large emitting process and sector, and we've been working with them on and off over the years. I'm just so excited that we're actually seeing something come to fruition now because we've been big on ideas for a long time, as has a lot of the oil and gas industry, right? We're famous for trying to work on ideas, but having something turn into an actionable, present, clear and obvious plan is just so exciting. We've spent a lot of money as Imperial looking at research and development for carbon abatement over the last 20 years. It's something close to $2 billion of investment. And we've been looking obviously at the liquid fuel side that we can supply to mines and to forestry and agriculture, but we've been looking at other alternative technologies too. And we are still looking at those things like hydrogen, other forms of electrification, all things that involve carbon abatement. But it makes life really busy and really complicated for a lot of us. And I know Lynette has the same challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Sustainability is a really big part of our operations at Finning. And you're right. In these hard to abate sectors such as mining, we need to have a lot of solutions available for our customers to help them reduce their carbon footprint in many different ways. And we're seeing that different customers are approaching it from different angles, depending on their geographic location, depending on their industry. But at the end of the day, customers in mining, and I would say really across all of our industry groups, are looking to decrease their fuel burn. They're looking to reduce their idle time. They want to rebuild their equipment. Our equipment is famously built to be rebuilt, which is an excellent way to increase your use of your equipment, but also reduce your carbon footprint. And then there's a lot of use of technology such as autonomy, where we're really finding customers are on a path looking to decarbonize their operations, but really want to maintain that productivity. So I really echo what you're saying, John, and we're seeing it as well in our operations.
Yeah, I'd be fascinated. Again, I'm limited on time today. I'd be fascinated to unpack some of those conversations you have with clients and especially in these big production facilities. But John, can you discuss? We're here to discuss renewable diesel. Can you? I was going to ask it, explain to the audience, but that'll make it sound like I actually know the details. So can you explain it to me to start with?
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes by lots of different names. And I guess the one thing I'll start with is renewable diesel is actually a very different thing than biodiesel. And when I talk to the sector and lots of different customers, they'll interchange the two words, but it's actually two very different things. But let me start. I'm a chemical engineer, so this is all really cool to me.
Mm,
If I talk about what renewable diesel is, it's basically things that are made from plant material that haven't been converted. They haven't been through some kind of refining process that changes their molecular DNA, if you call it that. So think things like vegetable oils that you and I might buy in a grocery store. So canola oil, soybean, safflower,
hmm.
sunflower oils, all those kinds of vegetable oils go into things like renewable diesel. Even used cooking oils and other fats and lipids can be used in this application. The key thing, though, is that you've got to hydrofine the material. It means taking the wax material out of it so that in cold temperatures, which of course all you folks know very well, these fuels have got to work down at minus 40s and plus
Hmm.
and worse. It's really important that the hydrogen be added so that it breaks down those wax molecules, and all this then works just like conventional diesel. And you'll hear that uh, explanation of this stuff looks and smells and works just like conventional diesel, and that's its greatest power in the marketplace, is that it is a pure substitute for conventional diesel without having to change an engine design.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Is that a shift in design or something to do with the equipment, or is it just can it just integrate right in?
Exactly. That's the biggest proponent of the fuel, is to say that it's a drop-in fuel. So it can be used in all the existing engine applications that we've looked at with our customers. One thing that make people aware of is that it's actually in the blends that you're using today. I think a lot of people wonder, this is a new fuel that's going to be introduced in the next 2 years. The reality is that it's been around for about 10 years. It's probably in the fuel that you're consuming today at about 10 or 15% of the blend, depending on where you are in Canada and what season it is. It's often, well, not often. Today, it's not produced here in Canada. It's all produced in the US and around the world. And we import it, bring it into Canada through various sort of ships and rail cars and trucks, and then blend it into the fuels and send it out all across the country. And that would be true not just of Imperial, but of any other producer, whether it be Suncor, Shell, or Parkland, or others. And so it's in the mix today. It's just at a very low content. And the big opportunity that we have is to put it into the mix at a much greater percentage, because the big benefit of it, of course, is that as a plant-based material, if you look at its life cycle carbon, it's about 80% better than a traditional fossil fuel
Wow.
diesel. Now, what comes out of the tailpipe is still carbon dioxide, and people get confused and think, well, when I burn it, if carbon dioxide comes out the pipe at the tail end, then how is it any different than conventional diesel?
Hmm.
The big thing is to look at life cycle around these fuels, and the fact that the origin of it as a plant pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere is where you get that 80% benefit.
Right. Lynette, I just have a quick question for you on that. What John is talking about right now, do you have a sort of a pulse on, do your clients, I'm thinking specifically the larger operators, people that have a lot of equipment, would they understand that, or is there an education process with everything that John is talking about as well?
Yeah, there is a huge education process. And in fact, I would say, most of my work is facing customers and working with customers. And of that time, I spend at least 60, 70% of my time educating our customers about renewable diesel, because it is a very hot topic right now.
Hmm.
It's a top interest. And there is those misconceptions. So I spend a lot of my time, explaining how it works, why there is the big win from a carbon intensity perspective, and where we see the market going. So John mentioned about how the renewable diesel is being produced in the US, but we're seeing that shift. And
Hmm.
obviously, companies like Imperial will be starting to move towards producing renewable diesel in the future. So we're definitely seeing a lot of that. And I spend a lot of my time talking to customers in that space for sure.
Hmm. Can we talk a little bit about, the opportunities, challenges of adopting these solutions into mining sites, specifically in Canada. Lynette, well, actually, I'd like to stay with you, sort of talk about the opportunity side, and then maybe Jon, if you don't mind, jumping in on the challenges side.
Yeah, on the opportunity side, we really do see it as a big win for mining. And it's what John mentioned before. This is really a hard to abate sector. So we see those off-road pieces of equipment, the really remote locations of the mines, make it really tough for mining companies to reduce their carbon footprint. And so moving to renewable diesel is a really good option. It's easily transported, it's easy to store, and from the benefit from what we promote is that it runs in cat engines as they're built today at any percentage. And so all the way up to 100%. And so I spend a lot of time actually explaining that to customers. Our warranties don't change if you choose to use renewable diesel,
Oh,
keeping in mind that there is a seasonality for renewable diesel, and
right.
customers must
Okay.
ensure that they're running the right product for the season. But in general, you can definitely run this in a cat engine, and there's no problems at all.
Okay, good. Challenges, Jon.
Yeah, it's it's not without its challenges, and we want to make sure that everybody can understand those as well. When I mentioned the fact that this material is produced in the U.S., one of the biggest first challenges with that is the material is not really being made for the Canadian climate today. It's
Mm,
being made with properties that work really well obviously in the U.S. and in the southern part of the U.S. But as you bring that material further north into Canada, it has challenges with working at cold temperature. So when Lynette mentioned the issue of seasonality, that's very true. That today, with that imported material not working well at cold temperatures, it's limited in how much we can use it in the wintertime. And oftentimes, companies like mine completely withdraw it from the blends today, and we would not be
mm,
comfortable asking people to use this imported material in the wintertime. There's a particular property of this stuff called cloud point. And so if you picture a beaker of it sitting on a shelf in winter, if you let it cool down to a certain point, it'll start to get cloudy, and that's the wax crystals coming out of it.
mm.
The material that we import today from the US has a cloud point of about minus 13 Celsius, so it becomes a
Okay.
problem for those waxy crystals to be hitting filters and causing problems. The big challenge going forward is to find sources that will work in the cold Canadian climate year round. That's the big benefit of the project that we want to put into Edmonton, is to de-wax and hydrofine this material to a much greater extent so
Mm,
that it can work at minus 50 Celsius year round at high concentrations. Another challenge I'd also kind of bring up is that we need to figure out better how to get these barrels into remote locations.
mm.
Fuel is pretty easy to transport today. Obviously, a lot of it's by rail cars and trucks, but we want to be able to get increasing concentrations of this renewable diesel from the places it's made, like we will do in Edmonton, up to remote locations where all your customers and kind of clients are working. And we need to think carefully about the supply chain to build it out, make it more resilient to winter temperatures and all the challenges of transportation in that kind of climate. And we're working on that as Imperial to make sure that we've got really resilient supply chains.
It's a lot of information coming at me, so I wanted to ask. I believe you said minus 50. So like that is quite cold temperatures. So is that where it's at with the product?
Yeah, good clarification, Jared. The material that we're going to be producing in Edmonton will work really well into the minus 30s and lower range. What we're going to continue to do with customers is be bringing in a good stable amount of conventional diesel in order for it to work as a blend down at the minus
Mm,
50s and even worse kind of range. But over time, we're going to be thinking about how much we can de-wax that material that we're making in Edmonton and be able to use that in a recipe that, again, is very stable and constant to work with those cold temperatures as a blend.
Can you please tell us about? I've held off on this question. Now I finally get to ask it. Please tell us about this new facility in. Is it? It's. I think it's in Alberta, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the Edmonton project that I was just mentioning, Jared. So we're really excited, and I'm personally really excited because I've been working on this thing for about 4 years now.
Mm,
We finally hit the button to go on full sanctioning for this project. We're going to be making about 1 billion liters a year of renewable diesel in the Edmonton
a
area. So we
billion?
have a
Did you say?
refinery.
Sorry, a billion?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
billion with a B.
okay.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And so to your point around how much volume is there, this is Canada's largest renewable diesel plant when it gets up and running. There's one plant today in British Columbia that's up and running. There's another in Newfoundland that's going to be coming, but will be Canada's largest when we get
Wow.
up and running in 2025. So it's really exciting. So it's in Edmonton. We have a refinery there on the outskirts of Edmonton, the east side, and we're going to be building this just as part of the same refinery. What's really cool about this is that it's using locally sourced feedstocks. And that's really the reason we chose Edmonton to do it. We're going to be bringing in canola and other kinds of vegetable oils as the feedstock for this. And as you think about the breadbasket of Canada and the prairies, that's really why we chose this location, is all those feedstocks and crops are really close to the Edmonton area. Then the biggest step and the biggest challenge of the whole project is bringing in what's called blue hydrogen. We've got a partner called Air Products who works and produces hydrogen all over the world, and they're already present in Edmonton with big facilities. They're going to be creating hydrogen, but the reason we call it blue, if you've heard that kind of description in the media, is that it's got carbon capture over top of the hydrogen production facility. So all those big stacks you would see normally for a hydrogen plant will have carbon capture, pulling the carbon dioxide out, transporting them by pipeline to southern Alberta where it's being sequestered underground. That creates a really beneficial impact to this renewable diesel, in that if you look at its full life cycle, including the plant-based crop material that's the feedstock, and then this very low carbon intensity hydrogen, the combined product is really powerful for any company that would like to use it for scope 1 emissions abatement, or your initial tailpipe abatement. So it's a really cool product. We'll be up and running in the early part of 2025. And yeah, we're just really excited to bring this to the marketplace, because it will be a product that can be used year round. Finally, right, instead of the imported material, this stuff can be used at high concentrations year round.
I need to ask a question about. I've been on mine sites. I've torn a couple down. Done a ton of these interviews, but most of my world is in cameras, lights, and that sort of thing, sitting in a studio talking to people like yourself. I'm trying to wrap my head around the testing that goes into bringing a product like this. I mean, you said 4 years, and I'm sure the research is probably thousands of people testing, collaboration with Finning and Imperial. And Jon, I'll stay with you on this. Can we just talk maybe the field testing side? There's a dyno lab. I'm not sure the details on that, but Lynette, I'd like you to talk about that. Can we just talk about the testing to even undertake something like this?
So if I start with the fuel itself, we've had the benefit, as I mentioned, of it being here in Canada, being used in low concentration for a long time. And we've been studying the hell out of that. We've been really looking carefully at how does that work in each customer's application? What are the different experiences as we've gone higher in concentration? Most of the OEMs out there have studied this for years and come back and said, well, at least 30% renewable diesel at 30%, conventional diesel at 70%.
Okay.
That works well in any kind of application that we've studied so far. So feel free, oil companies, you should be able to go at least to 30, and then we'll talk. And so we've been working a lot around, okay, if we're going to go beyond 30%, now we need to really work specifically with customers about what does it look like, right? What's the experience look like? So if I can just spend 2 minutes on the trial that we did with Finning at our Curl site. Yeah, so what we did, again, using imported renewable diesel, because that's the product that we have to use today. We don't have anything produced locally. So we imported material from the US Gulf Coast, came down through the Panama Canal and all the way up the western side of the US and brought it into Vancouver, and then eventually shipped it to our site at Curl. Curl is just north of Fort McMurray by a couple hours drive. And so a long supply chain to get it there, but we did a trial in the period of August to October of 2022 for about 8 weeks. And what we did is we took 4 haul trucks, so Caterpillar 797F. We put 4 trucks on 100% renewable diesel. And then we also took one PC 8000 Komatsu hydraulic shovel that we moved over to renewable diesel as its driver. And then we had a series of comparisons that we were running between those trucks and the shovel and our existing trucks and shovels that were running on conventional diesel. So that kind of gave us this kind of ability. How are the two performing compared to each other? So over that 8 weeks of time, we looked an awful lot at what's the power then being demonstrated by the renewable diesel, what's the productivity of the trucks as they run those exact same point-to-point routes between the conventional diesel and the renewable diesel. We even, at the end of the trial, pulled the injectors out of the engines to have a look, had the maintenance teams have a look inside as well. We're really pleased to say that it was basically imperceptible in terms of difference between what the people saw at the site between the conventional diesel and the renewable diesel. So that gives us a ton of confidence. That was over 1,000 hours of runtime on each of those different pieces of equipment. It's in the summertime, and we had to do that because we were using this imported renewable diesel, which I mentioned really only works well in the summer. And we're really looking forward to having a local production source that can work in the winter so that we can continue these trials to do it all year round and to do it up to 100% across multiple pieces of equipment in a greater scale. But we're really encouraged by that at first conclusion, which is, boy, this stuff performs basically imperceptible differences with conventional diesel.
Amazing. Okay, Lynette, could you talk a little bit about Dynalab?
Yeah, for sure. So talking a little bit, reaching on what Jon was talking about. So in addition to that field test, we were doing a test in our OEM remanufacturing facility. And so we brought in a tote of that renewable diesel that Jon was talking about.
Hmm.
And we just really wanted to ensure that the Imperial product matched the expectations for our power output and what we were expecting for the test, and how it was going. For us, the end result was that the renewable diesel provided a similar power output at full load as conventional diesel. So what we saw in the Dyno lab test was what Jon mentioned he saw in the field test.
Mm.
So very similar example, and we were really happy to see how that went.
That must be quite exciting from the Finning side to you know it's coming, you're waiting for it, and then the results come. It almost must be like a sigh of relief among the team, like, okay, we got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It was a good result, and we were really happy that the Imperial team was happy with the result as well.
Um, Jon, I mean, Lynette's sitting right here, so I'm assuming you're not gonna it's gonna be a pretty positive response, but why that collaboration with Finning and Cat and during the trials, why was that so key?
Oh yeah, I mean, we've been so pleased to work with Finning on this particular trial that we've had a long-standing relationship as a result of all the work that we do at Curl with them around keeping our equipment runtime as high as possible. They've been terrific partners with us at the Curl site, and it was just very logical for us to keep working together around, well, what's the next thing coming? And we've been looking at all kinds of different technology coming, whether it's battery-driven trucks, heavy haul trucks to a degree.
Hmm.
We've been wondering about whether hydrogen would become a fuel source under this. Lots of chats with the senior management team at Finning, and they said, well, if you're looking at renewable diesel and you want to manufacture that somewhere nearby here in Edmonton, then we should really be looking at here at the Curl site and trying to
Mm.
prove that it does work equivalently in these heavy haul applications. And so it was just a very natural thing for us to come together, and they've been so terrific to work with.
Lynette, anything to add to that?
No, I echo what Jon said. It's been a real pleasure to work with the team at Curl and through Imperial for
Yeah,
sure.
it's quite exciting. Again, I would love to be privy to being a fly on the wall in some of those discussions and planning sessions. I mean, it'd be so. Um, if you're into the industry, which I am, yeah, it would be very exciting. I want to quickly jump over, Jon, on the cold, the Canadian winter. You've touched on it several times, but I might ask it in a bit of a different way. Is that just discussing how it's dealt with, how it's approached, the feedback that you get talking to clients, just that whole discussion of how it's such a focal point for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really serious issue for a long time. I think a lot of people have known that we've been importing, and all oil companies have been importing material from the US and then wondering, if it only comes in and is being used in the summertime, or let's say the spring to the fall,
Hmm.
what's happening with the fuel mix? It must be going up and down like a yo-yo. This stuff is sort of in the blend, maybe all the way up to 30% in the
That's kind of
peak
what
of
I was
August.
thinking. Yeah.
Exactly, and then it falls away to nearly zero in the winter time. And so, does that cause me issues with my equipment? Is that something that's hidden in the background that I need to be considering? And am I suffering then productivity or power debits as
Hmm.
this kind of cycle goes on?
Yeah.
So we've been working with lots of different companies in the sector to try to understand. Well, let's see if we should study that further. And then, as we came to the conclusion that it's possible to make renewable diesel with this very cold weather capability, we need to now move past that concern and say, well, really what we want is a very steady diet of fuel
Mm.
composition coming to the different companies. The key is to make it locally so that there's a short supply chain to all those different spots between BC and Alberta. Let's try to think about the supply chain that will work well, because we still need to get it from that area around Edmonton out to those really remote locations. And the key thing that I'm really excited about is that, again, at the depths of temperature, and you'll know it well, right? We certainly see it at Curl at -45 and worse. You've got to have confidence in your fuel. You've got to be there to make sure that you're not going to be taking engines down with plug filters and all kinds of different questions that may come up. You've got to feel really good about the fuel being able to work in that severe condition. And we're really pleased to see that all the work that we've done underneath this Edmonton facility that we're going to build, all the lab work and everything else, we are uber confident that this stuff is going to work at those deep cold temperatures.
Lynette, a quick question to you is this, from your client standpoint, is there quite a bit of excitement that when they're hearing about it, is the onboarding discussion a challenge, or are people pretty ready for it at this point?
Yeah, I would say our customers are actually really ready for it, and we're seeing the pickup on in BC to be absolutely huge.
Mm,
They are importing from the US, and we're seeing a lot of BC-based companies already moving to renewable diesel. And because they have the warmer climate, so the BC Lower Mainland,
right.
whether it's construction customers and some of the mining customers that might be in kind of the lower part of BC, we're seeing that they can actually run the renewable diesel for longer periods of time, and we're not seeing any problems at all. So there is kind of that word of mouth that's been going through, I would say, kind of those construction and mining industries, and people are really excited about it. And that's, I think, really tying in well to what Imperial's doing. And you know, really what it is the people in northern Alberta, northern BC, and then into Yukon and Northwest Territories. Those are the customers that are actually really excited about hearing how the cloud point issues and the cold weather performance will
Mm.
really change the game for them as well. So they want to basically capitalize on the benefits that are being seen in the lower kind of lower BC area, and they want to take advantage of it as well.
I've been, I would say I've been pretty efficient with getting through some topics, so now I got a little bit of time to play. So we'll start. Let's start. Let's keep it with Jon. Or go to Jon. The the crystal ball question, the future, what it's going to look like. Can you can you sort of not, obviously there's a vision for Imperial, but also yours, what you see as the future. Let's go 2030 beyond.
Yeah, it's a great question. And maybe if I can start to talk about the near term before we go to the long
Sure.
term, I think it helps people because there's just so much change and so many different ideas and technologies that are out there past 2030 that I tend to try to anchor in the near term to say, at least tell me how I bridge from here to there. And
Hmm.
near term, we do see renewable diesel as a really effective way to manage carbon abatement with a drop in solution, right? It's just so low capital, it's available, it'll be in larger and larger production amounts here and availability amounts here in the prairies in Western Canada. So it's just the best way in my head to bridge to that next step into 2030.
Hmm.
And so what's really encouraging about that is that it's action oriented, then it's here and now. And that's the reason I say those words, is because when you start to think of 2030 and beyond, we start getting into technologies that really haven't proven themselves yet.
Right.
And they may well be groundbreaking and they may almost dominate the entire sector. Things like battery driven equipment could very well come along at scale with battery technology that is capable of the power and the longevity that the sector needs, but it's still undetermined, right? I think you're seeing it first in the long haul trucking sector, that they're trying really hard to make that work. Some of that, I think, learnings will be applicable to mining. Some of it may not. And so I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about what the best technology bet would be to make in 2030 and beyond. We're ready that if things pivot away from renewable diesel, we've got enough ideas in different kinds of novel technologies that we're going to be comfortable that we're going to be in the sector and being involved. But we're ready to see something pivot away from renewable diesel 10 years from now. When we built this project, I'll share with the audience, we built it on a 10-year life. We thought there's enough
Oh,
change.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, there's enough change in the sectors out there and with technology that we need to feel comfortable for the investment return over 10 years. And we need to be flexible to move on to something else after that. But right now, what I see is that people are looking for near-term options that are low capital, drop-in solutions.
Yeah.
I would like to get going on carbon abatement now, right? Because the societal demands and our stakeholders and investors are really demanding us to take some action now. And so that's what's exciting to me is even if renewable diesel is maybe a 10, 20-year type of lifeline, it has got incredible capability to be present here and now.
Yeah, and we've done episodes about what investors are looking for, how banks are financing projects, and the boxes that are needing to be checked in that. So it's a very important topic. Lynette, what do you see? What's your crystal ball over the next, we can start, over the next 5 years, but then beyond into the, 2030 plus.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to just reference a quote that I was able to track down. And so, according to the International Energy Agency, the energy sector's overall needs for critical minerals could increase as much as 6 times by 2040.
Hmm.
And we're seeing that the mineral demand is for use in batteries, for battery electric vehicles,
Yeah.
for grid storage, among other needs. So, we're really starting to see, to what John talked about earlier, is that renewable diesel is we're looking at it as a bridge strategy so that we can get ready for all the other, kind of alternative fuels or alternative energy options that are becoming available. Within Finning and Caterpillar, we're looking at battery electric mining haul trucks. It's a really big movement. There's been a lot of effort put into it, and Caterpillar released essentially kind of a press release and a video at the end of last year about their
Mm.
793 haul truck that they are going to be making as a battery electric haul truck. And it's really quite exciting. So, we're gearing up for that. And we're seeing a lot of, movement on a number of other fuels as well. So we have, we're seeing how hydrogen is going to have its application. We're seeing how methanol is going to have an application. But for the kind of the short term, is that renewable diesel is really going to allow customers to mitigate their carbon emissions for that short-term period, as some of these other technologies take a longer time to play out. And we really believe that as that need for critical minerals is coming forward, it's going to be a top Canadian priority. We're going to definitely see a lot more coming out of Canada, and need to meet that productivity and sustainability objectives. So we're thrilled to be a part of it. It's really an exciting space to be in. I enjoy working in the space, and I enjoy having those conversations with our customers and with our partners.
Both of you,
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
maybe just
Oh, yeah, please, John. Yes.
yeah, one last thing to add to it is what I kind of see, Jared, is that as exactly what Lynette mentioned, is those kinds of new technologies come along, maybe 10, 15 years from now, they'll be quite capital intensive for the industry to deploy. So they'll be dealing with not just the fact of trying to get new mines set up around all those precious metals that Lynette mentioned, which is really hard, and we all know how long that's taking considering regulatory processes. That big capital bet would then be combined with a capital bet around the equipment and the heavy haul equipment that's there. And so that double-edged sword, if you call it that, is a challenge for the industry.
Hmm.
And there may very well be very obvious solutions by the time that time comes around. But what I really like about the current situation with renewable diesel is it's a way to preserve capital for that future. It's
Right.
a challenge, right now to say that I would want to make a big bet around some technology and put the capital down now. To me, as a mining company, what I would be thinking of is I'd like to be able to use renewable diesel because it provides that scope 1 abatement here and now. Keep that capital aside. Let's think about where the whole sector's going, and I can use this in the near term for my emissions abatement that I know I need to do.
Lynette, would your clients sort of echo that sentiment?
Yeah, we're seeing it both ways, definitely. We're seeing the need for, to your point, John, setting aside capital because it is going to be very capital intensive. And we're definitely seeing that it is a journey, right? Some of these technologies are just definitely not available today. It is going to take time to build that infrastructure. So even if we had a mining haul truck available today, in full commercial format, the electrical infrastructure isn't there to necessarily
Yeah.
allow for that at a commercial scale. So,
Yeah.
it is a journey, and there's different steps that need to be taken along the way. And so, those immediate steps, looking at things like reducing idle time, looking at renewable diesel, looking at rebuilding your equipment, some of those very tangible early things that customers can do today, we're really advocating for,
Hmm.
because we do see this kind of longer term horizon. where there will be to Jon's point, capital intensive effort, lots of infrastructure bills that will need to occur, and we've got to get ready for it. And
Mhm.
so this allows for that to happen.
Yeah, and I'll use this opportunity to do a shameless plug for Mining Now because a lot of those topics we have covered over many, many episodes. So thank you both so much for coming on. I know your time is valuable, and it's a big topic, and so I really do appreciate you taking the time going through these things, and I genuinely hope we get to. I mean, there was some of these topics that could have been entire interviews just within themselves, like the testing, and I mean, these are some really big topics that we sort of spent a limited amount of time on. So I hope you both come back on at some point and we get to unpack them a little more. Thank you, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Great.
Oh,
Thank you
it
very
was
much.
a pleasure. Thank you very much, Jared.
And thank you everybody for watching. The show doesn't get made if people don't watch it, and so many of you tune in. We get to go to events, and people will reference episodes that they've seen or guests they've had on. We've had on. It just makes it so much fun. So thank you, and please keep suggesting guests. We'll love to work with you to get companies you think should be on the show on. And that is it for today. Thank you, Imperial. Thank you, Finning. Thank you, Jon and Lynette, and everybody that put so much work into putting this episode together. We will see you on the next episode of Mining Now.